Welcome to our training session. So here we're going to be talking about how you can be fit at home, what sort of things that you can do to develop strength. Now, before I get into what strength is, I just want you to understand two separate concepts. We're going to be talking about strength and hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is how you gain muscle. Strength is basically how you can get stronger. They're two separate things, but they're interlinked. So we'll go over that a little later. So thank you for the introduction, by the way. This is my brother Dhruv. And he's going to be doing most of the demos, and I'll be doing most of the talking for today's session. We'll be taking the mobility session later on. So during the demos, feel free to ask any questions. You can put them into the chat box on the site. And if you guys want to ask any questions later on as well, we can figure that out. So voice is breaking. Is the voice breaking for everyone? Or is the voice only breaking for...
Okay for me. Could you just be a little louder? I think that'd be fine.
Sure. I'm just going to put the mic in the middle. So if you see this, don't be alarmed. It's just a mic. We're going to get through the day. No worry. All right. So, so like I said, we're going to be taking you through a few demos of different exercises, things that you can do at home just to be healthy, just to be fit, just to build your own strength. Now, if at any point you feel like it's too much, it's too hard, we're going to be giving you easier variations as well. Remember, every single thing can be altered to your level in terms of how much strength you have. So you don't have to do every single exercise lifting the maximum weight. Strength is relative. What's heavy for you might be a little too heavy for us, or vice versa. So just find what's heavy for you, what's challenging for you. And the idea behind this program is to do what's challenging, not easy, but not to do something that's overwhelming. So whenever you're training, stimulate, do not annihilate. A lot of people go into the gym, they kill themselves completely, and then they can't work out for another week. Avoid doing that. Stimulate the muscle, don't annihilate the muscle ever. Do you have anything to add?
No, that's just, and to anybody watching, even if you're beginner, it doesn't matter what level you're at, everybody starts somewhere. I mean, even when we started working out, we were like, we weren't in the shape we are today. So like there's no secret to getting a good body, it's just consistency and just discipline, man. So like if we're going to give you the blueprint, and obviously like so you guys can take it from there, and there is no like rocket science behind this. Like everybody can get a great body and be in shape, man. Yeah, that's what we're here for.
I think somebody asked you a question right when you were telling them, is it for beginners? Yes, it is. Everything can be done by beginners, and the same movements can be done by advanced athletes as well. Let me explain why. It's because we fundamentally have the exact same body. You guys also have the same arms, the same shoulders, the same hips, legs, right? So everyone does the same movement, just that more advanced people will do it with heavier weights, and people who aren't as advanced will do it with lighter weights. It's basically that. So whenever we're showing you a variation, we're just trying to make the exercise a little easier, but your goal eventually is to make it a little more challenging, whether it's in terms of heavier weight or doing this slightly more challenging movement. So without further ado, I would encourage you to try out the movements while we're doing it. I do see some people on with their cameras. So please feel free to try out the exercises. And if at any point you feel like, I need to figure out whether or not I'm doing this right, switch your camera on. We can figure out whether or not you're doing it right. Okay, so we're just going to take you through the basic blueprint. Whenever you're doing any kind of exercise, we can divide it into two. Either it's an upper body movement or it's a lower body movement, all right? So some people can say, okay, something like a deadlift is a full body movement. Yes, but we don't put deadlifts on an upper body day because it's not mainly an upper body exercise, it's a lower body movement. So simply we're going to divide our program into an upper and a lower, all right? If you feel like you do not remember all of this, you can't remember all of this, don't stress about it. We'll share a PDF later for you. Somebody's saying equipment right now. There you go. Equipment right now is a bottle filled with water. Absolutely, that's perfect.
As long as you don't drink that water, you're fine.
Yes, you can actually make it easier for yourself by drinking, but don't cheating for today. All right. So we've got a bag at the back, if you can see that. So that is also a makeshift equipment. So if you don't have dumbbells or weights and you're training at home, you don't have any equipment, just take a bag, load it with books, load it with rice, atta, anything. Just something that's heavy, and just use that as a makeshift weight. That's what I did for years when my parents didn't allow me a gym membership. I don't know if you can see my mom in the background. you might be able to.
And you can see it works, man. You can see it works. It works.
Definitely works, 100%. So you can use makeshift equipment. I just came from the gym, clearly. But most of the movements are going to be body weight. So don't stress about whether or not you have access to the proper equipment. All right. So we're going to start you off with the lower body movement. Now, within each and every single exercise, either it's going to be a push or a pull. So upper or lower, and then a push or a pull, right? So let's start with lower body. We're going to start with push. So the first exercise that we're going to do is the most basic exercise pretty much every single person can do. It's a squat, right? So if you haven't already done a squat, here's a demo by Dhruv. So
Sideways, I'll show you different angles.
Yeah, he's just going to show you different angles. So what we're looking for here is his feet are going to be slightly wider than hip width. Now, this is going to change according to your anatomy. Everyone's hips are different. Everyone's hips are attached different, right? So this is a ball and socket joint. Because of that, some people prefer squatting with a narrow stance. Some people prefer squatting with a wider stance. So this stance is what Dhruv finds ideal for himself, but experiment with it a little bit and try to figure out what stance works best for you. So you're ideally going to open your feet slightly wider than hip width. And then you don't need to turn your toes out excessively, but just slightly trying to rotate them out. So imagine you're pressing your feet into the floor and then trying to rotate the feet out. So you don't actually have to rotate your toes out like that. No, imagine you're just digging your feet like you've got hands, you dig your fingers into the floor, and then you try to spread and screw the floor apart. That will naturally externally rotate your hips. All right. What stance do you use if you have an injured knee and you're trying to do a squat? Well, we first need to address why you have an injured knee. But most likely, if you have an injured knee, the best position for you is a wider stance because that allows you to have the squat be a little more of a hip movement as opposed to a quad movement. So whenever you're in a narrow stance, when you squat, you have to push your knees over your toes, which is fine. But if you've got a knee issue, open up slightly wider so that you can sit into the squat without compromising your knee. So Dhruv, can you show us a rep or two? Sure. There you go, right? So he's going all the way down, just a parallel or low parallel, whatever your flexibility allows you, right? So some people say you should squat with your butt touching the floor. Not required. It depends from person to person. And if you've got a knee issue, notice here, what he's going to do is come up slightly. It's a little more all the way up, all the way up. So open up your feet slightly. Yeah. So if you've got a knee issue, you're going to open up slightly more and then you're going to squat and naturally notice he squats with his hips going back more as opposed to his knees going forward. Versus if you bring your feet narrower, now squat, notice naturally, well, he's limited by his ankle injury. But if I was to show you the same squat, if I bring my feet a little more narrow, then I squat with my knees going over versus if I go wider, my hips go back. Notice here versus here. So this is more of a quad movement, your legs with the top of the legs. And this is more of a hip movement where you're sitting back, allowing room for your hips to come down. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to try out 10 reps. Okay. If you've got a dumbbell, pick up a dumbbell. If you don't have a dumbbell, you can pick up the bag, right? If you don't even have the bag, well, you can just start with body weight for now, right? So let's just do 10 reps. All right, Dhruv, you got 10 reps. So let's go. That's all the way down. 1, 2. Notice he's just going to parallel. He is not going any lower because his mobility does not allow that for now. And that's perfectly fine. You do not have to squat all the way down if that's not comfortable for you. Just still parallel also works. In fact, some people prefer to squat just below, just above parallel. So just come up slightly, just till here. So all the way up, now go down slightly and stop. So it's possible that your hip mobility is not that great. So you might just be squatting halfway down, perfectly fine. The goal is eventually to come as low as possible. And Dhruv will be talking more about that during the mobility session. So if you've done this squat, we're going to take a break right now. While we're taking the break, let me just tell you the benefits of the squat. First of all, it's a great lower body movement. It's excellent to build up strength in your quads and your hips. Now, some people say it's an overall leg movement. It's not, all right? When you're squatting, you're not activating your hamstrings. Your hamstrings are in a passive state, right? So you're squatting with your quads and your hips primarily. So it's a quad and hip movement, right? You're pushing yourself away from the floor. That's why it's a push movement. All right, let's try one more set, Dhruv. This time if you can face the camera and do it. Yep. Now I want you to see a front angle of what this looks like. If you'd like to try it out, please feel free to do so. We're going to go for 10 reps.
Make sure you smile, huh? Make sure you got to smile at all times.
Now notice he's not letting his upper body collapse. His upper body is not falling forward, right? His eyes are straight ahead. Where your eyes go, so will your body. So if you look down, that's actually not ideal. You don't want to squat by looking down. Ideally look forward or slightly up. That's perfectly fine. If you've got any questions, please put them forward in the chat box. You got 10?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So we're just going to do 2 sets at a time right now. So if you are doing the workout side by side, just 2 sets for today. Chill. You're just starting out, right? Now, another great lower body push movement is going to be the lunge. All right. Now, lunges can be done very different ways. So usually people do a lunge like this. Can you just show them a forward regular lunge? So they step forward and do a lunge, right? One more time. Step forward and do a lunge. This is great if you're trying to build leg strength. But if you've already got knee issues or you're just starting out, this is not the lunge I recommend for you. I recommend a reverse lunge for you. Can you show us what that looks like? So you're going to step forward and you step back and lunge. All right, very small difference. Instead of stepping forward and lunging, he stepped back and then lunged. Now, what's the difference here? The difference is when you're stepping back, the leg that's already on the floor, the stable leg, is taking all the load. So in this case, this leg here, that has all the load. So even if he is on one foot, let's say, try to stop halfway if you can. So come all the way up, all the way up, all the way up with your feet together. Now, even if he starts stepping back and he loses his balance for some reason, he's still got weight on his front leg and he's secure. So his knee is not in a compromised position by being over the toe. There's nothing wrong with knees being over toes. That's perfectly fine. But if you're a beginner or your knee health is not great, you want to avoid that. So he's going to step back and lunge. Now, when he lunges all the way down, notice his back knee is under the hip. It's not too far back. So I see a lot of people lunging with their back knee too far back. Can you show us what that looks like? There you go. And that puts undue stress on that back hip flexor right here, right? And that can give you pain over time because you're just putting your leg in a compromised position. You don't want to avoid that in this specific exercise, all right? So what we're going to do is we're going to try out 10 reps. Dhruv, can you do 10 reps? You good? All right, we're going to try out 10 reps. So if you're at home doing this exercise, let's go. 3, 2, 1, 10 reps. 1, 2. All right, notice that front knee is not excessively going over the toe. Let me stress again, knees going over the toes is not an issue. But in this exercise, our focus is to load the hip by stepping back and not allowing the knee to go forward too much. Still a push movement because you're pushing yourself as you're coming up. What's that? That's 10? All right, can we get 10 more on the other leg? There you go. All right, that's 10 more on the other leg. Guys, let's try the other leg as well, please.
I hope I'm not the only one doing this and someone's doing this with me.
I don't know if you guys caught that, but he basically said, I hope I'm not the only one doing this and I hope somebody else is doing this with me. So I pray someone's doing this as well. All right, I see a hand pop up. Okay, excellent. Somebody is doing this with you. At least one person is. Awesome. Oh no, we've got a few people actually. We've got 4 people.
That's what I'm talking about, baby. Let's go. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go. All right. What we're going to do is we're going to take a short break. While we're taking that break, let me explain the benefits of this exercise. It's similar to the squat, except it's on one leg. Now, you can't do an exercise. You shouldn't do, ideally, an exercise always on both legs in a stable position. You've got to challenge your stabilizer muscles. So when you're doing this exercise, when you're training unilaterally or one side at a time, you're challenging the stabilizer muscles in your hips. So the inside of your leg, the adductor, the outside of your leg, the hip, glute, being challenged, and that's what you're going to be growing side by side. So you always want to train both sides also to avoid any imbalances in strength. Because a lot of times when you're squatting, let's say my right leg is stronger than my left, I'll start pushing away a little bit on my right, and that's actually over time going to cause me an injury. So to avoid that, you want to always train unilaterally or one leg at a time as well. All right, breaks over. Let's go. Round 2. 3, 2, 1. All right, stepping back and lunging. There you go. 1, 2. Torso stays upright, not stepping too far back, right? You want to avoid stepping too far back. That back knee stays under the hip. All the weight is on the front leg. Switching sides. Switching sides. That's 3. That's 4. That's 5. How can you load this exercise? Just wear a backpack. Wear a backpack or just hold a dumbbell in your hands and you're perfectly fine. That's how you load the exercise, all right? If you've got a resistance band, what you need to do is you can just press the resistance band under your foot. Can you just show us 2 reps?
I think I'm pretty good. I just worked out before this. So that's why.
All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to place a band under your leg. You can wrap your hands around to get extra resistance. You can step back and then come. Step back and come. Let me show you on the other leg as well. Step back and come. If you've got a bag, you can wear the bag in the front or the back, whatever you're comfortable with. Bag goes in front of you, you can hug it. Step back. There you go. All right. Ideally, finish off one side at a time. So do your right leg and then your left leg. All right. I think I've got a camera on. Sambhavi, thank you so much for showing us that you're actually doing the exercise. Hats off to you, even though I'm not wearing a hat. All right. Okay. So that was our second push lower exercise. We're going to do a third push as well. Now, this can be done on the floor or it can be done using a chair. If you're using a chair, make sure it's against the wall so that you're stable. Let me show you how. So you place the chair on the wall like so. But for this demonstration, I'm going to ask Dhruv to stand behind the chair so that it doesn't slide, so that you guys have a better angle. So you're basically just going to keep your upper back on the chair, right? Upper back. Notice my lower back is free because if I hinge, I have space to move. If I went too far up, then I can't move, right? My upper back, shoulder blades, stay on the bench or the chair. From here, knees and feet in one line. I sit my hips down and then extend up. Sit my hips down and extend up. Fairly simple exercise, but one that is excellent for building hip strength. If you've got lower back issues, knee issues, ankle issues, any issues related to the lower body, almost always, 90% of the times, it's because your glute strength is just not there. It's not adequate compared to the rest of your body. So glutes are your number one muscle group to train, especially if you're trying to become fit and healthy and athletic, all right? So this exercise is an excellent exercise, not just for women, also for guys. Because I see a lot of girls doing this, but guys are like, man, I don't want to do that. Don't do that. Everyone needs to do it. Question?
While doing this exercise, can you also explain when to inhale and exhale?
All right. So usually people say that, when you're doing cardio, let's say boxing, you exhale with the punch. When it comes to strength training, it's actually best to do the Valsalva maneuver, which basically means you're holding your breath, because when you're holding your breath, your spine is stable. See, there's no bone in your abdomen, right? Here you've got the rib cage. Here you've got bone everywhere, but there's no bone in your abdomen. There's only the spine. So to stabilize the spine, you need to keep your core contracted. So when you take a deep breath in, and then you hold the breath and then tighten your core, your diaphragm pushes down against the core and stabilizes this entire trunk area. So whenever you're doing an exercise, let's say a squat, you take a deep breath in, hold your breath, and squat. Squat. So you can exhale and inhale on the way up. Whenever you're up, inhale, exhale, take a deep breath in, hold, squat, exhale, inhale, hold, squat, exhale. All right. Same thing here. So if you want, you can hold your breath. But if we're being realistic, if I'm truly being honest with you, in this exercise, you're not that compromised. So you don't really need to hold your breath unless you're lifting very heavy weight. So if you're lifting like 200 kilograms on your hips, then you would definitely need to hold your breath, tighten up the core, and then extend your hips. Otherwise, if you're just doing this with body weight or a very light weight, you don't need to stress about your breath. All right.
It's not a workout related question. It's one.
All right. So Dhruv, can you show us a couple of reps, please? Sure. All right. So what we're doing here is, like the squat, you want to open up your feet enough to allow your hips to sit between your legs. So if his feet are too narrow, too close together, that's not going to allow his hips to move, right? So he wants to at least spread out his feet a little wider than hip width. And then if you could give us a couple of reps. There you go. All right. So if you notice at peak extension, come all the way up, his feet are a bit too far out. So what you want to do is bring them in slightly, a little more, a little more. Is that comfortable for you? Or is that hurting your ankle? Okay. All right. So what you also want to do is you want to push your knees out just slightly. I'm not saying flare your knees, but just make sure your glutes are active as you're going down as well. When you're coming up, flex the hips completely, flex the bum. This is an excellent exercise to build up your glutes. Now you can also load up this exercise by simply placing the bag here. And if you don't have, if you could give us a couple of reps too. There you go. You can just hold the bag there. If you don't have someone to help you place the bag, you can also just go all the way down, right? So you can just load the bag there, get into the right stance, push yourself up, and there you go. Safe, right? And whenever you complete your set, you just come all the way down, sit all the way down, and just remove the bag. All right? I hope you got a few reps of that as well. If you didn't, please try it out. I would recommend it. Now, I've already explained the benefits, but let me reiterate. You do not want to miss out this exercise. It's a great glute builder. Your glutes are what support your spine. If there's an imbalance in your glute, your spine will almost always be imbalanced. So let's say if my right is too strong, left is too weak, and I have a slight tilt, automatically my spine is also going to be tilted. And that's how people get spinal issues as well. Same thing from the front to back. If my glutes are too weak, I'll get this sort of a duck position, and that puts too much stress on my lower back, another issue. So you want to?
I was just going to note the backaches. Like when people have backaches, that usually means there's weakness somewhere around the back, in this case being the glutes. So if you have stronger glutes, they can support your back is going to go away like that.
Absolutely. And also, like this is a tip that I give on my Instagram. So if, like this is what I did personally. So you want to switch your camera on, the front facing, right? Go into a mirror, stand naked completely. Make sure your back is against the mirror, right? So you can see your reflection and look at your own butt like this, right? It's important because what you need to do is you need to understand whether or not your glute muscles are developed. If your butt looks like a pancake, you're almost always going to have back issues. So please make sure that you have good, strong glutes. They're not only aesthetically appealing, but they're required for strength, right? And for stability and to make sure your knee never has issues. All right. So that wraps up our push section. We're going to do a quick download on the pull session for your lower body now. So we're going to get rid of that chair. Now, the issue with pull is that almost always, if you're doing a push thing, you're pushing away from gravity, right? You're pushing your own body weight away from gravity. So you can do it without any weights and it's not an issue. Pull, however, requires weights because you can't pull yourself away from gravity, right? You can't levitate. So you almost always need weights for a pull movement. So even if you're training at home, it's very hard to do a pull movement at home without any equipment. I will give you a variation, but almost always it's better to have some equipment. So even if you just have a bag of rice, bag of books, weight, anything works. So what we're going to try out is the deadlift, one exercise that almost always people have issues with. So let's address that right now. Now with the deadlift, you're pulling something away, right? Remember, pushing is with the front of your body. Pulling is with the back of your body, all right? In this case, with a squat, glutes work for both push and pull, right? But when we're talking about hamstring squats, front is for pushing, chest for pushing, back is for pulling, and also upper back is for pulling. So when you're going to do this exercise, if Dhruv, you could just give us a demo. So this is a slightly different variation from a regular deadlift. So this is what we call a sumo deadlift. So what you're basically doing is, yeah, so you're going to open up slightly wider than hip width, right? So you don't actually have to open up that wide if you don't have a barbell. If you're just doing this with a dumbbell, kettlebell, or just using a bag, just open up slightly wider than your squat stance. Then you're going to bend down to grab the weight. Now, at this point, what I want you to do is I want you to sit your hips back and raise your chest up, right? So imagine if you were trying to pull this inside towards your body, what would you do? You would pull your arms and sit your hips back and then stand, right? So the problem with deadlift is people try to use their lower back to lift up. So they'll round up and then lift up. But you actually have to use your glutes. So similar to a squat stance, push your hips back and then come up, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to try out a rep. So you're opening up slightly wider than hip width apart. Notice his hips go back, right? His knees don't go forward too much. Hips go back. And then he squeezes and flexes his glutes to pull the weight away from the floor, right? So as he's pulling, he's also straightening up his back and pulling his upper back towards the back, all right? Notice his spine stays locked in. So his spine is not moving anywhere, right? So he's not flexing or rounding his spine. His spine stays where it is. Hips move. This section is what we're moving back, right? Not the lower back. Hips have to move back. If you find that a regular deadlift is not for you, you can almost always feel a lower back, your lower back giving you issues, go for the sumo deadlift. Because the sumo deadlift is a much safer position. It's a naturally better position to lift something off of the floor. Even if you look at babies, they'll naturally go into a sumo stance and then lift things up, right? They'll never go into this stance and then try to lift up. Not saying a conventional deadlift is not ideal, but this deadlift, a sumo deadlift, is just safer on your lower back. And just generally, you can pull a lot more weight. So that's also good in the gym. All right. So a couple of things here. Remember to focus especially on your breath in this exercise. We're doing the Valsalva maneuver here. So what he's going to do is one more time, deep breath in, coming down. All right. Relax for a second. So what I want you to do is at this point, Dhruv, I want you to take a deep breath in, hold your breath. Now just pull the weight without lifting it off of the floor, but now start pulling with your glutes. 3, 2, 1, and then pull all the way up. So if you're having issues understanding how to lift the weight off the floor, this is an excellent way to build up that mind-muscle connection with your glutes. So you're going to go down, take a deep breath in. Now pull, but using your hips. So don't actually pull the weight off. Feel the hips contract, feel the glutes work, and then pull all the way up. Automatically, you'll get a better connection with your glutes as opposed to your lower back. All right. If anyone has any questions at this point, you can shoot them across. Now, the deadlift is actually, well, a full body movement because you're using your upper and lower together. It will work your lats as well, your back as well. But this is primarily a glute and a hamstring exercise. Hamstrings are the most neglected for most people, right? Because we focus on doing squats, we develop the front of our legs, and back is never developed adequately. As a result, there are imbalances in strength between the front and back, and people have knee issues, people have all sorts of problems, right? So you've got to make sure you're training your hamstring as well. Now, I'm going to show you a conventional deadlift, but for the conventional deadlift, we're going to use bands because we would ideally need 2 dumbbells for this one. So let's try it with a band. Okay. It's a bit heavy though, so it's fine. Okay. All right, go ahead. So what you can also do is, so Dhruv's going to demonstrate how to do a conventional deadlift by just keeping the dumbbell horizontally, right? So what I need you to do is narrow your stance a bit and then moving up. So what you want to do at this stage is start at the top, lower down slowly, moving from the hip, notice, not the knee. And as soon as you feel like, okay, I've reached my abilities in terms of strength for my lower back rounding, you want to stop right there. So you don't actually have to go all the way down, right? So just go to the point where you feel a stretch in your hamstrings and then come up. There you go. So let's try this one out. We're just going to do 10 reps. So notice his knees are not going forward. Remember, whenever your knees are going forward, you're working your quads. In this case, if you want to work more hip, push the hips back and then coming all the way up. So this is a slow and jerk movement. No, so you don't have to come up quickly, but it's just that the hamstrings are a muscle group which move very fast. They've got fast twitch fibers. So I don't want to get into the technical bit just yet because we'll save that for our last session where we're actually discussing how to do training, what muscle groups to train how. So for the hamstrings, naturally you'll notice that you have a lot of strength and they move really fast. So here, Dhruv's been doing this movement for a long time. So he's naturally coming up very quickly, but you don't have to. You can come up at your own pace, not a problem. No need to go slow, but you can come up at whatever pace works for you. Can you use 2 dumbbells for this? Yes. Ideally, you do want to use 2 dumbbells for this. So you're going to hold each dumbbell in one hand. Let's say these are the dumbbells. Yeah. So imagine if these are the dumbbells, you're just going to hold them in one hand each. And if you could demo the exercise, there you go. And the front view as well. So you're just holding your dumbbells like that. Perfectly fine. So what you could also do, so if you don't want the dumbbells to actually compromise on how your upper body is in the movement, what I mean by that is, if you keep the dumbbells in front of you, almost always it might scrape your shins a little bit. So what you can do is you can bring your dumbbells to the side, and then as you slide them down, they're actually going against and grazing against your shin as opposed to your shin bone. So the shin muscle, the tibialis, as opposed to your shin bone. All right. So you can bring the dumbbells to the side slightly and push your hips back. Now we're going to try a single leg version of this exercise. All right. So this is a single leg deadlift. So if you can't do the double deadlift because, well, you don't have weight that's challenging enough, which is a possibility, you can just do a single leg deadlift. All right. So this is also an exercise to challenge your mobility. So you're going to be on one foot basically. You're going to kick the opposite leg back behind you. And you're going down. All right. Someone just said sweating already. Excellent. It's a good warm up. All right. Are you talking about yourself or me? Because I am also sweating and I'm not even exercising.
But you know he's working hard.
It's just the energy.
Yeah.
It's just the energy. All right. Okay. So for this exercise, you're kicking the opposite leg back behind you. And you're slowly lowering with control and then coming all the way up. All right. So if you were holding dumbbells, you would just be holding your dumbbells like so, going down and coming up. There you go. So can we get a front view as well? Why don't you take a break? I got this. So if you're looking at the front view, basically what we want to do is you want to keep the knee stable. So make sure your knee is not wobbling. Okay. Ideally, I'll give you a slightly easier variation for this. So make sure your knee is stable. You're bringing your torso forward, bending at the hip. So the opposite leg goes behind you. Notice this knee stable and then coming up. So this is what the movement looks like from the front. And this is what the movement looks like from the side. So going down and then coming up. Going down and then coming up. Now this is too hard for you. Here's an easier variation. So when you're going down, you can just tap the toe behind you, load that front hip, and then come up. Tap and come up. What you're not doing is a lunge. So you're not bending at the knee. The knee stays locked, right? Slightly bent and locked in this position. You bring that opposite leg back and come up. So imagine if you were about to sprint and then shoot up, right? So you're trying to sprint and then come up. Sprint and then come up. So you can do this with dumbbells as well, not an issue. You can challenge yourself. Like the lunge, this is also important because you're training it unilaterally. You'll figure out what your weaknesses are, right? So you'll notice maybe your left side is more stable than your right, or your right is more stable than your left. which is an excellent realization to have because now you know what to train, which side is weaker, which side to focus a little more on, right? Now, we're just going to try out one more set of this. If you could just go for 10 reps on each side.
Can't do the right side.
He can't do the right side. So a little story about Dhruv. He actually tore his Achilles tendon, this tendon here, which is the strongest tendon in your body. But as a basketball player, you know, overuse often causes injuries. So he is limited in his ankle flexion for now. And stability is still an issue. He's recovering, but he's getting stronger every day.
I can't do my right side.
I'll do it on the right for you. All right, guys, switching legs. We're doing right side as well. Just going down slowly and coming up. Now, if you've got a resistance band, same thing like the lunge, just keep it under your foot. You go down, and come up, down. All right, that's 10. I hope you guys got 10 on both sides. Now we're going to do one last pull exercise. This is called a floor hamstring curl. Now I will have to demonstrate this because of Dhruv's ankle, he won't be able to. So what you basically want to do is, for this one, just make sure you're wearing socks. If you're not wearing socks, just place a towel under your heels so that your feet can slide, all right? So I'm just going to demo the exercise. Just notice the hip movement more than anything. The hips stay up during the entire movement, all right?
Yeah, no, sure. Also, we see you, Shamvi. Good job, man. We see you doing it with us. That's what's up. I mean, whoever else is, we can't see you, sorry. Whoever else is, thank you. But we can just see her because the camera's on. All right.
So you're going to lay down on the floor. From this position, I want you to raise the hips up. Now, just to begin, what you're going to do is slide your feet out and then step back in. Lift up, slide your feet out, and then lift back again. Let's just do 10 reps like this.
10 reps.
Hips go up, hips stay up, and then slide your feet out. Don't let the hip drop. Up. Up. And last one. That's 10. All right. Now, this is the easier version. So once you've mastered this version, you can move on to the slightly more challenging version. So I'm just going to demonstrate it once, and then once you've recovered, you can try out this version as well. All right. Make sure your hip stays up, but if it's too challenging for you to keep your hip up, you can also keep your hip down. But at a certain point, keeping your hip down won't get you the same effect. So I would personally recommend do the easier version and then do this version that I'm showing you once you've prepared yourself adequately. So for this, you're going to keep your hips up. Now slide your feet down. My hips don't touch the floor. Knees don't touch the floor. And then I just slide back. So all the way down and then back. All the way down. Going for 10 reps.
It doesn't look as hard, but you'll feel the burn for sure.
Now you'll be very tempted to break at the hip and do this.
Yep.
Don't do that. Keep the hip up the entire time. Slide and then up. Slide and up.
Yep. You should feel it. If you're doing it right, you should really feel it in your hamstrings, like big time, right here.
No? I think I lost count.
Man works too hard. He doesn't count his reps. He doesn't count his reps.
No, I just forgot. All right, cool. So this is what we call a hamstring curl. All right. So do the easier version. Once you've built up the strength, then move on to the more challenging version. If you feel like I'm sort of there, I can do maybe a couple of reps of the difficult version, but then 10 reps just won't do it. No problem. Do 3, 4, however many you can, and then finish off a 10 rep set by doing the rest of the reps, the leftover reps, in the easier version. So what I mean by that is, You start off, you're doing a set of 10, but the first 3 reps, you did the more challenging version. Perfectly fine. Do your 3 reps, and the last 7 reps, you can do it in the easier version. And then slowly make that into 4 and 6, then 5 and 5, and you'll be able to do 10 in one go. Whenever you're done with 10, move on to 11, and then 12, and then 30. All right. Now, you can also make this more challenging by just adding a weight on your hips. But I think for most people, just to begin with, just doing 15 reps with the right technique is adequate. Like, let's work to that level, and then we can move on.
Should the head be down on the floor?
So your head can come up a little bit off of the floor. It's not an issue. It's not going to compromise your neck at all because the shoulder blades are relaxed. They're in a stable position. So don't stress about that. Your head can stay on the floor as well, perfectly fine. I just naturally find that when I'm really pulling hard, my neck starts to come up a little bit. It's not something to stress about, though. It's not like you can get a spasm or whatever. So don't stress about that. Okay. Now, we're done with the pull series for the upper body, for the lower body. So just to recap, lower body, we did push and pull. Push, we did the squat, we did the lunge, and we did the hip thrust. All right. For pull, we did the deadlift, sumo and conventional. We did the single leg deadlift, and we did the hamstring curl. Now we're going to move to upper body. We'll start with push and then move on to pull. Now for push, upper body, the simplest exercise that you can do is a push-up. All right. But I see people do the push-up wrong all the time. The push-up is supposed to be working your chest and your triceps and your shoulder. Most people just work their shoulder and their tricep. Can you show me a wrong rep, Dhruv? So for a wrong rep, he opens up super wide and then he goes sort of halfway down and not actually getting any reps and just adding to the damage on the shoulder because you're putting your shoulder in a very compromised position. It's not supposed to be taking up that much load in that sort of position. Now imagine a push up is basically just a push back. What do I mean by that? You're pushing yourself back from the floor. So if you had someone standing in front of you, how would you push them? The exact same way you do a push up here, right? You push them this way. You never push them this way. So why do people do a push up this way? That makes no sense, right? Because then you'll end up hurting your shoulder. So whenever you're pushing, you keep your elbows close and then push up this way. If you're finding it hard to engage your chest, here is the simplest way to engage your chest. Lift your arms forward. Round your back. Now you'll feel tightness in your shoulder. If you tap your shoulder here, you'll feel the shoulder muscle flexed, right? Now, keeping the exact same position with your arms, just lift the chest up and curve your back in the opposite direction as much as possible. Automatically, you'll start feeling your chest. So if I go this way, shoulder, this way, chest. Why? Because to flex your chest, this shoulder blade, this bone here, needs to be locked in this way. So as long as you're pushing your chest up, you've locked your shoulder blade, and then naturally when you do your push-up, it's going to be all chest instead of being all shoulder. So Dhruv is going to demonstrate a few beautiful reps for us. Show off your strength a little bit. There you go. Strong guy, you can probably do 100 push-ups. So notice his chest is going down. His hips are not falling, right? So a lot of people will just drop their hips. Dhruv, show us a couple of bad reps of just dropping your hips and chest stays where it is. So come up, just drop your hips. Yeah. So that's not a push-up. I don't know what that is, right? But a push-up is going down towards the floor and pushing your chest away from the floor. That is a push-up. Now, if this is too hard, simple variation, just drop your knees. So exact same push-up position, come into plank first. From here, drop your knees. And your elbows go back. Remember, this is the position. And you're going to be doing a few push-ups this way. Now notice he naturally breaks at the hip a little bit. So it's not like his body stays completely aligned this way. He's breaking at the hips. That is perfectly fine. Not something to worry about, right? Now, can you also show us a front angle growth? Because this is important. Of just the good ones? Yeah. So you can move to the side a little bit. Slide back a little bit more. There you go. All right. Notice his hands are slightly wider than shoulder width, right? Just slightly wider. So if this is the shoulder width, here they're just slightly wider, all right? Great. So Dhruv is going to demonstrate a few reps. Now notice his elbows go back and they don't go to the side because you're not pushing up this way. Elbows are in, right? So imagine if I give you a frontal angle, you're basically moving your elbows back this way, not this way. In and chest comes out because we did that, right? The rounding and the push through. There you go. So just one more time.
No burpees, don't worry. No burpees.
No burpees, don't worry.
Unless you want to.
So we're gonna keep our hands forward, round the back, lift the chest up, and just from this position, bring your elbows back. That is the starting position, bottom position of the push-up. Simple. All right. Now, can you show us a pike push-up? This is for your chest, right? So I'm going to show you a pike push-up. The angle sideways.
Actually, both angles are from this first.
This is fine. Now, a pike push-up focuses more on the shoulder, the front of the shoulder. So if you've seen people in the gym doing, you don't need to do any of that, right? You can just do this exercise and it's going to develop your shoulders like anything. So you don't actually need to do front raises. That's not a great exercise anyway. All right. So for a pike push-up, what you're going to do is you're going to lift your hips up, right? Hips shoot up as much as possible. Even if you want to come up onto your toes, perfectly fine. And show us a rep, please. All right, just don't turn your hands out too much. Yeah. Elbows go back. He's just tapping his head to the floor and then coming up. Simple. All right. Now, if this is too hard for you, what you can do is you can bend your knees slightly and push your weight back on your feet a little more. Right? So the straighter your knees are, the more challenging the exercise becomes. The closer your feet are, the more challenging the exercise becomes. The further back you step, the easier the exercise becomes. Right? Now, again, remember here also, you're not pushing your elbows out. Elbows go back. All right? So if you're doing this, not good because it can tear your labrum here over time. It can be an overuse injury. So avoid pushing your elbows out this way. Keep them locked in. Keep the shoulder blades, these two bones here, keep them locked in and then doing your reps, right? We're just going to try out 10 reps. That look he just gave me. All right, let's go. 1 and 2 and 3. Limited range of motion. You don't have to go too far forward. If you want to make it more challenging, you can try to touch your chin towards the floor. All right, excellent. There you go. Good job. Good job. I hope you at home, you guys trying out at home, can do it as well. All right, so these are two exercises, great push exercises. Now, if you really want to build up your shoulder strength and you want to build up shoulder stability, here's another variation of the push-up, which works both your chest and your shoulders, but through different ranges of motion. It's called the Hindu push-up, all right? It's called the Hindu push-up because it literally comes from the Surya Namaskar. So do you want to take a break? Okay. All right, so Hindu push-up is basically you go into a plank. Now from here, raise your hips up as much as possible. Now you're going to dive and then extend all the way up and then dive back and then extend. So you're going to dive. Notice how his shoulder moves through a different range of motion as opposed to a regular push-up. So you're going into a pike push-up, working your shoulders into a chest movement, pushing away from the floor. There you go. And then back. Now, if this is too challenging for you, you can also break it down. So you can just do a dive and then just come into plank. And then plank and push your hips back. So dive, plank, and push your hips back. You don't have to curl yourself back up if it's too much for you, if it's too challenging for you. This is a slightly more advanced movement. So once you've mastered the push-ups, you're not doing push-ups on the knees anymore. You're doing your pike push-ups, then you can move into this movement as well. Overall, it's going to build up your shoulder strength and stability. So those are basically your push movements for the upper body. You can also at home, if you've got a pair of dumbbells, do a chest floor press. So we're just going to demonstrate with that with the blocks once. So you're going to lay down on the floor. Imagine these are your dumbbells. So you're basically just holding a dumbbell in each hand. Exact same position as the shoulders, for the shoulders as the push-up. Now here what you're going to do is lock your shoulders in one place. All right. Now first, just lay down flat. No curve in the back, right? Okay. So he's gonna lay down on the floor once. Now what I want you to do is Dhruv, keep your shoulder blades where they are. Bend your knees. Now without moving your shoulder blades, slide your hips back as much as possible so your back naturally arches. When he does that, his shoulder blades go into a locked position this way. There's a curve under his back. So his back is in a natural arch because even when you're standing, your spine has an S shape, right? Shoulders locked, S shape on the spine, and then he presses up. And that's not going to compromise his shoulder. If he was to do this movement without getting his back locked in, it's going to be all shoulders, right? So just like we did here, if your back is flat, then you're just going to get all shoulders. But if your back is nice and arched, then you're going to get all chest. So look at my shoulders right now in the camera. What I'm doing is, if I was on the floor right now, I'm sliding my hips up, just like Dhruv did, and then locking my shoulders into place. And that's how you do a floor press without compromising your shoulder health. All right. Now we're just going to move into the pull movement for your upper body. So you can come up and take a break, right? So just a wrap up push. We did our push-ups. We did the bike push-up. We did the Hindu push-up, slightly more advanced version, and we did the floor press. All right. Floor press is obviously working one arm at a time. So that's excellent because you're moving unilaterally as well. What we are going to demonstrate right now is a pull movement for your upper body. Whenever you're pulling, remember, push is from the front of your body. So your quads, your chest are pushing. Pulling is with the back of your body. Now, when it comes to the front, you've got one chest, big muscle. The chest has pec major, minor, but essentially it's one big muscle that you're using. For the back, however, it's a complex series of muscle. So if you could sit down, Dhruv, on your knees with your back showing into the camera. So when we look at the back, essentially what we're looking at is lats here. So there's a big, thick muscle, big chunk of muscle here called your lats, latissimus dorsi, right? Forget about that. Lats. Lats are this big chunk. They are the strongest part of your back. So whenever you're doing a movement where you're pulling, naturally you want to use the strongest part of your back, this muscle that ties into your lower back, this muscle here. How do you activate this muscle? Whenever you're doing a pull movement, when your elbows are close to your ribs, you will activate the lats. Whether you're pulling from the front, give us a rep or two, extend your arms. Whether you're pulling from the front, go ahead. Notice his elbow position, or you're pulling from the top. Elbows in, elbows in, elbows in. There you go. Or you're pulling from the top. You're going to end up using more of your lats whenever your elbows are close. If you want to use the other section of your back, which is equally important, your upper back, again, a complex series of muscles. We're just going to talk about the big chunks right now. Your upper back, whenever you want to pull with your upper back, you will extend your elbows out slightly. So give us a rep or two of the exact same movements. There you go. So when he wants to use his bigger muscle, the lats, elbows go in and pull. Give us a few reps. And whenever he wants to switch on these muscles, the upper back, he just flares his elbows, right? So elbows locked into the rib cage whenever you're doing a lat movement, elbows flared whenever you're doing an upper back movement. Same thing if you're pulling from the top, right? If you're doing a lat pull down, this is actually using more of your upper back. And as soon as you bring your elbows forward, it's more lats, all right? So if you're doing this exact same movement at home, how do you alter it? So we're going to try out the exercise now. So if you've got a dumbbell, if you've got a bag, if you've got resistance band, I suggest you use those right now. We're going to start you off with, let's just try a resistance band for now. Just come and stand. So just going to lock this on your foot. This one, yeah, 1 foot. So we're just going to show you one arm at a time for now, right? So just hold the band on your right side. So you're basically tilting forward, tilting over. You can keep one hand on the knee. This is what we're working right now. This section of the back, the lat. So you're going to pull, right? Now give us your upper back. How do you do that? By flaring your elbow. So notice it's the exact same movement, except when he keeps his elbows close to his body, he's working his lats. When he's flaring his elbows, he's working the back of his shoulders. So if you can give us a front angle as well. So go ahead. Elbows close to the body, lats. Elbows wide, back of the shoulder. Simple. No need to complicate it any more than that, okay, do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? Forget about everything. Now, one more function of the upper back is to rotate your arm externally. So if you were to do this right now, try it out. As soon as you rotate your arms externally, you feel your upper back, the back of the shoulder naturally work. As soon as you rotate out. So if you're doing an upper back movement, let's say this sort of a row, it's ideal to move your arms out slightly. This will naturally engage your upper back completely, even the external rotators. All right. Now we're just going to try out a few reps. So go ahead, hold on to your dumbbell. We're doing a single leg at a time. So just going for 10 reps using your lats. You can try the same thing out with the dumbbell. I think that's a bit too heavy. Okay. That's 30 of that. Now, if you're using a super heavy weight like this one, keep a chair or something stable in front of you. Lock your body into position. Notice my back is flat like a tabletop, right? You could keep a cup of wine or in this case water and it wouldn't spill. Flat back, both hands on the bench or the chair. Now from this position, I relieve one hand, the one I'm working. I hold on to the dumbbell, bring it up and pull. So whenever I want to use my lats, I keep the elbows close. Whenever I want to use my upper back, I'll keep the elbows further away from the back. So just pulling this way, into the chest, elbow close to the body. Now if I want to make this an upper back movement, elbow out. Let me show you the front angle. Elbow close, lat, elbow out, upper back. We're just going to go for 10 reps on each side. Dhruv, go ahead and use the band because this is too heavy. On the side? Yeah. Try it out. And if you've got any questions at this point, please go ahead and ask. Awesome. Now upper back with his elbows going slightly wider. There you go. Awesome. Now, the most important section of the entire workshop. If there's one thing that you could take away from this session, it's that you need to train your back and your glutes. Forget everything else for a second. The most important muscle groups that you need to start training is your back and your glutes. Why? Your glutes support your spine. So your entire knee health, spine health, everything depends on your glutes. Your shoulder health depends completely on your back. You see a lot of people, they can't even raise their shoulders up all the way. Why? Because this part of the body, the front, is too strong, overpowered compared to the back being too weak. As a result, your shoulder shifts forward or rotates inside. That is what causes shoulder pain, frozen shoulders, all of that. So if you want to relieve yourself of any shoulder pain for life, focus on shifting all of that strength work onto your back. Naturally, you will improve your posture because it's your back and your glutes that determine your posture, not your chest, not your quads, none of that. If you're standing, you just tilt the camera upside up, yeah. you're standing, what you'll notice is, if I've got good glute strength, naturally my hips will be even. Otherwise, they'll be tilted back or under, right? For my back, if my back is not strong, I will not stand with my shoulders back. I'll stand like this. So someone who does not train back and glutes will almost certainly look like this or this. But as soon as you train these muscle groups, this goes back and this goes up, right? So we start looking like human beings, strong human beings, once we start training our back and our glutes.
So we just got two questions. One is
questions.
My knees in straight position, is that all right when we're doing the back movements? Is that okay?
When you're doing your back movements, when you're doing the row especially, I've seen a lot of people do it like this, with one knee up, rowing this way. The problem with that is, as soon as you rotate, that can give you some sort of a hernia tear. You want to avoid that. Place both feet on the floor, parallel, knees slightly bent, and then rowing. You don't want the knees to push forward, push your hips back, and then row.
And next question, hope that answers your question.
Hope that answers your question.
When is a good time to exercise, in the morning or evening? Secondly, what to eat or drink before this exercise?
All right, great question, especially the first question. What is the ideal time to train? Ideally, you want to train after having a meal, and once you've moved around and there's some blood circulation. Not to say that you cannot train in the morning. 100% you can train in the morning. If that's the only time you have, that's what you prefer. Perfectly fine. Generally, people will train and feel better more towards the afternoon, not late evening, but early evening. So that would be the perfect time to train. Either afternoon or early evening is the best time to train. Even from a hormonal perspective, that's when your cortisol, when your testosterone will ideally peak. So that's when you want to train. I have another question with that question. What to eat before exercises, right?
What do you want to eat?
So, I mean, if you're doing strength training, you want to make sure the meal that you have before that, if you're not doing low carb, by the way, you want to make sure that that meal had some carbohydrates so that your glycogen, the glucose in the muscles is adequately topped up, because that's what you're going to be burning for strength training, right? So you're not really burning fat per se when you're doing these movements, you're burning glucose. So you got to make sure you're having enough carbohydrates. Any sort of potatoes, rice, etc., perfectly fine. You can also have a fruit. If you're going to have any of the carbohydrates, ideally maybe an hour or an hour and a half before your exercise.
Some neck exercises, work from home is killing me.
All right, so your neck is not what's killing you, it's your back that's killing you. So whenever you have neck issues, if you could turn it on a little bit.
Also, you should probably tell them to put the laptop here and not there.
Yeah. So your neck is actually supported by the two muscles that run across here, your lower traps. All right. So if this muscle is strong, naturally it will pull your neck into the right position, right? If you round this section, your neck goes forward. Forward, chin out, right? This being weak will give you this posture. As soon as this gets strong, flex, naturally neck comes into the right position. Now this comes into more of your mobility work. So we'll be discussing that in the next section. Right now we're targeting the bigger exercises, the bigger muscle groups. So we will be talking about neck later on in the series as well.
There's a question before that. You missed any body weight exercise for back?
Any body weight exercises for back? See, pull-ups are the best exercise, but that's the thing with back. With back, you can do Y raises, etc., but they're not going to give you the strength you require. So I would personally advise if you could take like a bag and use the bag filled with books to do your rows, that is ideal. You can't build adequate strength because you don't. So when you're doing a push-up, you're pushing your body weight against the floor, right? When you're doing a pull-up, if you're using your body weight and pulling that up, perfectly fine. But if you're just doing, let's say, a back exercise like a Y, you're not using any weight, and that's not enough of a stimulus for your back muscles to grow stronger, right? So ideally, you want to use any sort of weight, resistance band, or even just a bag with books.
Do you advise training empty stomach? Because we work out in the morning. It's not always possible.
So it's all right to train empty stomach. Just make sure after your training session, you are having a meal that's high in protein. Because if you're fasted and then you exercise, there's going to be breakdown of protein because that's what you're doing in the gym, right? When there's breakdown of protein, there needs to be recreation. So you need to rebuild that protein. That's how you build muscle. So if you're exercising on an empty stomach, make sure after your exercise, you are having some sort of a protein meal within an hour or two of exercising. All right, can you demonstrate the last exercise with the bag? Certainly I can. Can you do light? I'm just going to answer this question because it's super easy. Can we do light cardio in the morning, empty stomach? Absolutely. I do a walk every single morning.
To do light cardio in the morning. Like you just go, even if it's, sorry, go on. No. I'm just saying, even if you just go for long walks every morning when you're up, if you're empty stomach, even if you just go for a walk, like 30-minute walk, 40-minute walk, that's pretty good too.
Yeah. And just make sure you're hydrated, right? Make sure you wake up in the morning, have some water, and then go for your walk. Now, if you were to do a row, either you can hold the handle here, you can hold the straps here, or you can just hold on to the bag this way, whatever suits you. Ideally, what I would do is hold on to the handle here. I would hold on to something that's a bit higher, let's say, if I could keep my hand here. Again, my back is flat, and I'm just pulling out the bag this way. Right? So if it's a front angle, if I want to work my upper back, this way or this way, elbow basically goes down. Any other questions? Guess not. All right. So
not by 12 minutes, so
yes. Excellent. All right. So thank you so much, guys, for giving us your time. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share what we've learned over the years with you, because there's no point having all of this knowledge if you don't impart it to someone who can actually benefit from it. So I hope you guys end up using these things that we've taught you, and hopefully we're able to help you build some strength, build some muscle, because that's the only thing that's going to sustain you through life. Even when you're much older, everyone's getting there. What you need is strength, right? That's a skill that never goes away, and well, is required for adequate health, so that you don't require assisted living. So I hope that works out for you. Dhruv, please.
Thanks, you beautiful people, for sticking with us for the past hour and 12 minutes. And we had a great time teaching you guys a few tricks up our sleeves. And hopefully this helps you guys out, and we all look beautiful, even more beautiful together.
Excellent. All right.